Thank you very much for the teacher and practitioners.
非常感谢茶禅行者。
Brings me great honour to be able to introduce this evening's speaker for the talk titled Heart Sutra, Theory and Practice. Stacey and I are the hosts this evening. Stacey had the blessing to be able to meet her when she was just in Yad. And for me, I had the great honour of being able to meet Venerable Miao Guang first when she was translating for Master Xing Yun, and also when I was over there for Life in Chan.
接下来我们将要欢迎今天晚上南天大学人间佛教系列讲座《心经理论与实践》的演讲者，他就是我们的妙光法师。那妙光法师他12岁的时候由台湾随家人移民澳大利亚，现为星云大师的首席翻译员，人称佛系译员。那他在12岁的时候，在南天市找到了心灵的依靠，种下了翻译种子。
So with great pleasure, I would like to introduce to you this evening's speaker. Please welcome Venerable Miao Guang.
那我们现在就用非常热烈的掌声欢迎我们的妙光法师，南天大学人间佛教荣誉院士，星云大师随侍英文翻译，佛光山人间佛教研究院副院长，佛光大词典英译召集人，以及南华大学宗教兼任所助理教授。欢迎妙光法师。大众请坐下。
Please be seated.
Thank you very much to our two hosts, my very old friends, and to all the venerables, to the ladies and gentlemen, and all distinguished guests tonight. Thank you very much for being here. It is truly an honor for me to be sitting here tonight, 20 years after my renunciation, but 40 years after my first encounter with Buddhism and Guangshan. I would have never imagined that I would come back to the town I grew up in and to be delivering a talk in English. And so it is truly surreal, truly overwhelming, but truly joyful. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Well, my main purpose in coming back to Sydney was actually just to deliver a 1.5-day talk or lesson or workshop at the Nantian Institute. But I guess by the time Venerable Abbess Manke found out, she decided to make life a bit more challenging for me. And so she gave me that opportunity to also do a talk in Sydney in Chinese and English, but also to visit Brisbane and Melbourne. So I would like to thank Venerable Abbess Manke for this amazing privilege. Tonight I'll be talking about the Heart Sutra, theory and practice. And I would have to say, again, it's quite interesting for me to be sitting here and delivering a talk because I really actually set out to serve as the interpreter to a Buddhist master. And so usually as an interpreter, you will be joined by a speaker on stage where you wait, you listen, you repeat, and it's pretty relaxed. And now I'm on my own. And so that becomes a whole new experience. But nevertheless, I would say I'm still here in the presence of Venerable Master Xing Yun. First of all, in all the calligraphy writing that you see outside the hall. And secondly, as we choose the Heart Sutra, we might often wonder whether the Heart Sutra is a sutra. For those who would say no, you might agree with me that your reason to say no is the fact that the Heart Sutra really doesn't open with the general opening of a genuine Buddhist sutra, which is, thus I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was in such and such place with so-and-so people, and so on. But the Heart Sutra is otherwise. You will see that it actually does not begin with it does not begin with the Buddha, it begins with Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. And so what is the story behind that? If we have a chance to read a long version of the Heart Sutra, you might discover that actually that version of the Heart Sutra does fit the basic criteria and opening of a genuine Buddhist sutra. So where it says, at one time, the Buddha was in deep meditative concentration. And so deep into the concentration, he inspired 2 of his students to speak on his behalf. One of them was Avalokiteshvara, the other was his great student Sariputra, who was foremost in wisdom. And so therefore, under his inspiration, Sariputra turned to Avalokiteshvara and began a question. What does a man and a woman have to do in order to learn to attain the perfection of wisdom like you, Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara? And then from there onwards, we will go back to that amazing opening with the very, very elegant and wise and compassionate figure in Buddhism, where he's in that elegant recline and starts to have this review about his journey to the perfection of wisdom. And so I would say, although Venerable Master Xing Yun is not here in person, but I do carry with me his messages, his care and concern to all of our friends in Sydney, in Australia, for your many years of dedication and your many years of friendship. He wants to say hi, and he wants to tell you that he's doing well, and he hopes that in any other places that is closer to his home, he will have an opportunity to meet you. And so with that opening, I would say, as his translator, I now am more comfortable sitting here to deliver this talk. And so as I speak of the Heart Sutra, I would say many of you are probably quite familiar with it because we chant it almost every day. When I was 12, and when I got sent to a Buddhist temple for I don't know what reason, this was the first sutra that was placed in front of us. This was the first one that we were asked to recite, to memorize, and in return we will get a prize. My prize was chanting beads instead of candies. So I still have those chanting beads. I'm very grateful to the Venerable, and I'm sure many of you probably have that similar experience. But I would like to ask a question. What is the Heart Sutra about? So when many of you think of this, you might be surprised with how little we have paid our attention to the understanding of the Heart Sutra, despite the fact that we've chanted it, recited it thousands of times. And so I would like to use today's opportunity to walk through that journey of Avalokiteshvara in the hopes that in the future when we do come back to recite it, we now come closer to the perfection of wisdom. And so the Heart Sutra in its title tells us that it's not really about the human heart or the human mind. Instead, it's about the heart of the Buddha's core teachings, written in the Prajnaparamita Sutra, numbering over 600 scrolls, but summarized into 260 words in Chinese character. But that being said, we also understand that the perfection of wisdom really is a lesson about how we understand shunyata, how we transcend the ordinary, how we gain that immense possibility to become anything and nothing at the same time. And so that being said, we would also understand that having read the Heart Sutra, we will begin a journey where we attain all of our understandings and realize that all the practices begin from the heart. And so, as I begin, when we look at the essence of the perfection of wisdom, or the heart of the matter. We would also know that by heart, it actually means mano, or mano vijnana, which is the seventh consciousness, which is also our second brain. Our first brain is the biological brain, and the second brain is what we call the mano vijnana. But where is that? An alternative to finding it will be that our second brain is actually our intestine. New biological foundings have helped us realize that our intestines can feel and have emotions without perception. For example, if you eat something really spicy, your intestine will really feel for the food. But nevertheless, that intestine, or what we call gut brain, certainly contains our emotions. It is one of the sources to where our emotions come from. And so that being said, it is important for us to realize how we understand this world with that heart, or those hearts, and what to do with our understanding of reality. And so that is why in the Chinese version you see the Heart Sutra beginning with the beautiful recline, because this is the moment when an enlightened sage begins to take a recap of his path to the perfection of wisdom. So he's looking back to his journey, and he's going to tell you a story on 3 levels of reality. And ultimately, hopefully, after tonight's talk, we may all agree on some level that reality ends up becoming in the eyes of the beholder. It's more than just beauty, but for practicing Buddhists or learners of the Dharma, it becomes reality. And so it begins with this recline. It says, when Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva, was crossing in a deep prajnaparamita, he realized that the 5 skandhas are empty in nature, and thus he overcame all ills and suffering. In short, we would just translate it into one line. When he meditated, he got rid of suffering. That was pretty much it. But if only our journey to enlightenment is as easy. But before we reach that other shore, we need to look at a few words in this very first opening line. The 5 aggregates. We read it all the time. Sometimes it's known as the 5 skandhas. Sometimes it's known as the 5 heaps or the 5 piles. So what do we mean by the piles or the aggregates? Is it the conglomeration of something, or is it the coming together of something? And so in simpler words, we would say when Avalokiteshvara says that the 5 skandhas are empty, becoming his first experience when he courses in the deep prajnaparamita, he simply wants to present to us the 5 aspects of human experience. It's as simple as that. Right? These are the precise functioning things that gives us the human experience through perceiving, through feeling, through our process of cognizing, and through the building up of our consciousness. And therefore, by saying that he meditated, he attained enlightenment, we would say that through these 5 aspects of human experience, the Bodhisattva presents to us level 1 understanding, or level 1 understanding of emptiness, that whatever it is that we take to be ourself is actually non-substantial. In other words, we start with that Bodhisattva's journey to think about in what ways is our personal experience of reality empty or non-substantial. And in moments when we truly believe that this is who I am, this is what I'm experiencing, we derive dukkha, that dissatisfaction, which becomes threefold. And so, therefore, as we say that these aspects of human experience are empty, it's simply telling us that, first of all, our experience does contain dukkha, in moments when our expectations of reality fail to satisfy us. And secondly, our experience is full of change. It's never the same. And thirdly, it is conditioned. It's never independent of anything. So putting all these three conditions together, we can pretty much say that the table which you're sitting at is dukkha, isn't it? Because it does not satisfy all conditions. Secondly, it is always changing. If we put three together, you can lie on it, it becomes your bed. And it's also conditioned. It has to depend on how you use it in order for you to see that table. And so that being said, we have to think about when he says he overcame all ills and suffering. Right? Does dukkha have to be translated as suffering? The answer may be no, because dukkha is dissatisfaction. It's like watching a food movie when you haven't eaten for 2 days. Right? You don't satisfy your hunger, even though you tell yourself, I am getting food. But you don't satisfy that. And so that virtual experience can be compared to the moments when we perceive form. We think about how it makes us feel. And then we consider how it affects our behavior. Then we also think about what actually lingers in our mind after that experience. And so that not only arises in the body, but also in the mind. But if I say that suffering or dissatisfaction exists in the body and the mind, which is the one that causes the dukkha? I would say this becomes the question of the ox and the yoke. Right? Which one is moving? Is it the ox or the yoke? Which one of them is actually pulling the cart? Then that experience becomes twofold. So what did Avalokiteshvara get rid of? Was it actually his body when he said the 5 skandhas are empty? Or was it his dissatisfaction or his dukkha that he got rid of when he said he overcame all of this? This is something worth pondering over. But after all, we have to say that when he says he overcame all ills and suffering, he simply did not eliminate anything. Just by saying that you're empty, it doesn't mean that you're not here. It simply means that he found a way to simply abandon the cause to dukkha. So when the desire is here, we can never claim to get rid of suffering, because that's again the ox and the yoke. But at the same time, I cannot control the conditions of my body. If I have to eat, I have to eat. If I have to sleep, I have to sleep. I can't separate the yoke from the ox. Therefore, that kind of puts us in a dilemma as to how exactly do we overcome ills and suffering. And so, he gives us an equation. By saying that the 5 skandhas are empty, you first begin with the forms or the shapes that you see, right? And through sensation, you decide to give that form or shape a name. And then having given rise to that name, in your mind, it forms a mental image of an object. For example, now if I tell you that we need to think of a tennis ball, you will immediately have the image of a tennis ball, but it's not here. So it's a mental formation of what you have seen and conceptualized. And then finally, into your consciousness, you remember that this is a tennis ball. So what is the problem of that when Avalokiteshvara says we need to overcome it? He wants to say it because he hopes that we will not base any of our desires on what we perceive. Otherwise, we'll just continually be dissatisfied. Take this for an example. What do you see? Some unsure voices say, ice cream. Okay? Why is it ice cream? Because it's round, right? It's glittering, it's yellow, it looks icy, it's kind of sweetening. And so My friend once went to a 5-star hotel restaurant. As soon as they sat down, her little sister saw a ball of yellow glistening object on the table. And immediately she told herself, ice cream. She took a whole gulp, a big chunk, put it into her mouth, and the next moment, it's actually butter. That's to come. What you expect, what you see, really isn't what you see. Therefore, the Bodhisattva says, first of all, as we understand Shunyata on level 1, our first understanding of the Buddha Dharma is not to eliminate or give up anything, but to see what it is for what it really is. So not to eliminate anything, but don't give rise to desires based on what you see. And so that put simply, we would say on level 1 Shunyata, which Avalokiteshvara presents, other than level 2 and level 3, in plain words, the self you think is you is constantly changing. Would you agree? Yes. And secondly, there are many of such selves that arise all the time. For those who joined the Tea Chan this afternoon, and those who joined the Tea Chan again this afternoon, you're not the same you, because your experiences, your sensations are constantly changing. And thirdly, having established 1 and 2, by overcoming all ills and suffering, Avalokiteshvara tells us, don't cling on to any of them as the real you. Experience it in the moment, but remember, that's not the real you. And so, initially on the 5 aspects of human experience, we start to take our own grounding in place of reality and think about how we want to take in reality as it is, not reality as it should be. And then we look at the next line. O Sariputra, form is emptiness, and the very emptiness is form. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form does not differ from emptiness. It's like an equation that's being tossed back and forth. So in this second line, Sariputra was taught form versus emptiness. They're not different from each other, but at the same time, they are only each other. They cannot exist outside of each other. And so at this point, if we talk about emptiness, have you ever wondered why it's actually Sariputra instead of Spruti? Who is the foremost in understanding Shunyata? Who is supposed to appear in the Heart Sutra? But Sariputra here represents that experience of reality. And on the back of it, the experiences of the spirit of Shunyata that was very well expounded by Spruti. And so therefore in this case, as we talk about Dharma, we then realize that Dharma is translated as things, because everything is defined by emptiness as a thing that arises out of something. So what is emptiness? You might wonder, how do you actually understand emptiness? Or can you see emptiness? Yes or no? No. Professor Lancaster once asked a Korean Chan Buddhist master that same question. And the master told him, I'm going to show you how to see emptiness. It's very simple. Ladies and gentlemen, close your eyes now. And on the count of 3, open your eyes again. Now, 1, 2, 3. Now, as you open your eyes, everything you see is emptiness. Why? Because by Dharma or thing, we refer to every object that is conditioned. And that conditioned thing, oops, my laptop is very empty today. So that conditioned thing which we see becomes the other side of emptiness for us to see that, yes, indeed, it depends on a whole lot of conditions in order to come into being. So for that experience, we see water as wave, and we see wave as wind. But once the wave falls back into the water, it becomes water again. Therefore, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. As long as you give it a definition, as long as you can conceptualize, it becomes a dharma with a small d. And so that being used in our lives, it could do extreme wonders, because we speak of that immense potential to become something and nothing at the same time. So there was once a man who knew he was very close to the end of his life, and he wanted to decide which of his 3 sons will inherit all of his money. And in the end, he wanted to give this money to his wisest son. So how does he determine who is the wisest? He called upon his 3 sons and said, I'm going to give you $100 each. Okay? And whoever is able to fill up this empty house in front of me by the fall of night first will get to inherit all of my money. And so by giving out that $100, it was a test to the sons as to how much do they need to spend in order to fill up the house. So the youngest son just dashed forward with that $100 immediately. He disappeared inside. And the second son stood there for a few seconds thinking about what he could do, and then he also walked away. And with the first son, who remained in his seat, whistling, smiling, not thinking. And so that immediately gave his father some kind of idea as to who may be closer to getting his inheritance. And so, by the time night fell, he would see his second son coming back with a whole truckload of twigs. He spent the least amount of money to buy the largest amount of volume that actually filled up the house. He only spent $10. And then, after night fell, when it was completely dark, his youngest son came back, panting and sweating with nothing in his hand, and he had lost his $100. Okay, poor boy. And then he waited and waited and waited and just could not see his oldest son. So he started to wonder what happened. And then fortunately, after some more minutes, his oldest son showed up, again whistling with his hands in his pocket, seemed to have nothing in his hand. So his father was extremely disappointed. Right? He couldn't just find the right his inheritance. But the oldest son said to his dad, Dad, I have come up with a solution. But the dad says, you have nothing in your hands, right? You don't seem to have come up with a plan. Dad, it's okay. Come with me into the house. So in the darkness, this oldest son leads his father into the house, asked his dad to close his eyes in the darkness, and he took out a candle and a match in his hand. At that moment when he lit up the candle, as his dad opened his eyes, he immediately filled up the entire house with light. But light is emptiness, emptiness is light. You cannot grab onto emptiness, you cannot change it, you cannot touch it. So Sariputra was given a lesson that they are only each other. And then Avalokiteshvara continued by saying, whatever is emptiness, that is form. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. And in this case, having been taught the 5 aspects of human experience, now Sariputra is taught about the sensorium. And by sensorium, we refer to the all of human experiences that comes from, first of all, our senses and our brain. Because after all, our experience comes through our senses. So when we see an image of a little girl eating an apple, we think that she's eating an apple, right? But it's just an image. If I show that picture, yet again, none of us in this room is actually eating that apple. We only think it is true through our sensoriums. And so if we experience something, we need a sense acceptor. But Buddhists are not interested in ontology, or the totality of existence, Buddhists are much more curious about our experiences. And so therefore, by saying that the feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness that we experience are also emptiness, it's telling that this sensorium is what we experience. But this experience is not reality. Therefore, it's empty. So how do we apply this to our real life? We need not think of anything as our true self, but at the same time, everything is that true self. A few years ago, I went to Yixing Dajue Temple, which is the Foguangshan Ancestral Temple. And I took a stroll down this long path outside the White Pagoda, and this couplet just struck me. What does it say? There's no self, no people, no world. There is matter, reason, and sentient beings. So on the surface, this couplet seems to be quite contradicting, doesn't it? And so I pondered over Venerable Master Xing Yun's intention in writing this very contradictory couplet. Then I realized what he means is actually that very line. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. There's you and me, but there's me and you too. And so that sense of oneness and coexistence gives us a chance to really embrace this world as a totality, because we now learn to look at the world as a part of ourselves. And only by then are we able to show true empathy and compassion. I experienced this in 2001, in the year after I became renounced, and that was my first trip as Venerable Master Xing Yun's interpreter. I will have to say I pretty much hit the jackpot. On my very first trip, I had to interpret for my teacher who had to respond to the September 11th attack. So on September 11, 2001, at 8:06 a.m., the first plane flew into the World Trade Center. And an hour later, another one flew into it. And it caused this great mishap around the world, not to mention the fear. And so it was about 1 month before we were about to dispatch the Foguangshan Buddhist hymn of 100 people to New York to perform. But on the day it happened, phone calls came in throughout the world, all day. These were the calls who tried to convince Venerable Master Xing Yun to cancel the tour, because it's simply too dangerous. I remember I was there that morning. After the phone calls, all the monastics at Foguangshan surrounded Venerable Master and gave him maybe 1,000 reasons not to go to New York, right? Because the terrorists were still at loose. And there was just too much fear. There was a lack of trust. And they tried to convince my teacher for almost half an hour until he finally looked at everyone and said, "Are you done? Can I talk now?" So everybody quietened down, and then he says, "I know what you're saying, I understand, but this is the exact moment that we as Buddhists should go to offer comfort and solace." As soon as he said that, everybody just remained quiet. And then 1 month later, the tour group of 100 arrived in Manhattan. And we were very fortunate to be granted the opportunity to be the only Buddhist organization to go into Ground Zero to perform a prayer service, because we were told that among the 2,000 to 3,000 victims, many were Buddhists. So this is the day when we flew into Manhattan. The pilot took the effort to circle above Ground Zero so we knew what was still happening. 1 month well after the attack, the burning was still going on. I could hear the screeching sounds of the burning steel 1 month after. Therefore, as we moved closer and closer to Ground Zero, everybody's heart just sank deeper and deeper. We honestly, truly felt the gloominess and the fear. And when we were about to reach Ground Zero, just the 200 meters of distance from the gate to Ground Zero took us 2 hours to cover. Because after every stop, we will have a security guard who will come onto the bus to check our identity and to check what we are doing there. And you will see these over 100 security guards or policemen were from all backgrounds. Latino American, Caucasians, Asian American, African Americans. And they all looked at us with a heavy sense of distrust. So as soon as we arrived at Ground Zero, my teacher gave everybody an instruction as to how to conduct the ceremony. We first recite Avalokiteshvara's name 3 times, then the Great Compassion Dharani. And then it will be followed by the Buddha's light prayer, and then finally an offering of flowers in the place of incense. After he gave those instructions, he turned to me, who was standing beside him. He said, "Remember, you shall translate as I say." So that was quite interesting, because to me, of course, what else would I say, right? I would only repeat what you say in a different language. So why are you reminding me of this? I thought he was worried that I would forget about my role as a translator. And so the ceremony began when we were chanting Avalokiteshvara and the Great Compassion Dharani. These security guards continued to stood back with their arms crossed, and they simply just hang around with this very suspicious eyes. They were wondering what this group of strangely dressed people were doing, right? Doing incantations they couldn't understand. And then after the Great Compassion Dharani, Venerable Master began his prayer. And in my expectation, I thought he would begin his prayer by the usual opening, "O Great Compassionate Buddha." But that was the moment when everything changed. Instead of saying that line, he said, "O Great Compassionate Jesus, God, Allah, Muhammad, and Buddha." And immediately I turned to him with my mouth open. I looked at him and I was thinking, what was going on? Aren't we Buddhists? Why are you praying to God? Right? So he just quickly struck me on the arm and said, "I told you to translate as I said." He knew I would be confused. So I quickly gathered myself and translated that into English. And immediately after hearing it, the guards began to lean forward with their arms dropping off their shoulders. They were very surprised. And the second line he said was, "Please bless your people so that they may rest in peace in your garden, in your heaven, and in your pure land. Let all disease be in peace, and let all of the families be in peace and at rest." And so as soon as I translated the second line, many of them began to cry. It was a long-awaited moment of peace and solace that they were after. Because after a month of cleaning up, nobody actually walked up to them to ask if they were doing okay. And therefore the prayer continued, and every line I translated, I discovered that they displayed even more willingness to move closer to Venerable Master, until they came forward at the end of the prayer and asked him a question. "I am not a Buddhist. Can you please bless me? Because I'm feeling very, very insecure." And without a word, Venerable Master sprinkled the Great Compassion Dharani water and also added one line in English, "God bless you." That was my first trip as his personal interpreter. I was totally confused. I thought we were about to convert. I just couldn't comprehend the scope of the event. Therefore, I remained silent all along our trip back to the hotel. And somehow he seems to understand my confusion, so he turned to me and told me, "Don't ever think you're out here to spread the Dharma. If anywhere you go, anything you say does not offer any moment of comfort or solace to the people you meet, you are as good as having not come." So it was upon that moment I realized what he meant by humanistic Buddhism. For the interest of human beings, right, to be of service to anyone in need, or anyone who recognizes the value of compassion and kindness, then that would be humanistic Buddhism. Therefore, to go back to this verse, when we talk about no self, no people, no world, I realized he was teaching us how to look at ourselves. Right? In our principle as a practicing Buddhist, Never stick rigidly to any kind of concept or idea, because it's always changing. But any moment you come across people in need, cater to their needs. Read their hearts, feel for their emotions, and offer your response in a relevant way. That's what it means by no self, no people, no world, in our own perception. But there is always matter, always reason, and always sentient beings in this real world. We can never separate ourselves from the reality. Therefore, in plain words, we would say emptiness does not mean things that don't exist. Instead, it refers to the characteristics of all things which have no substantial, unchanging self. Because of this empty nature, we have the endless potential to become nothing and everything. So in 3 lines, Sariputra will taught very, very solid lessons about how to feel as an ordinary human being. But the lesson continues. O Sariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are not produced, not stopped, not defiled or immaculate, not deficient or complete. And so that, again, reiterates the need to never hold on to any concepts, because a concept is a construct by your mind. And if it's a construct by a mind that's ever-changing, what do you call that concept? Do you hold on to it? Do you believe in it? And it's also telling us that since our mind is always creating it, be careful. Our mind could be the cause for all dukkha. In most cases, we seek on the without for some kind of solution and answer. But by saying that all dharmas are marked with emptiness, it's telling us, yes, understand that they're changing, so seek for an answer from the within. Okay? Don't look for that lost puppy. It's right between your thighs. And in other words, as we look for all of this, we have to remember our emotions come from the within. We are the ones who created it, and we are the ones who can overcome it. So therefore, there was once a lady who was about to go on to a holiday. She was so excited about her trip to Bali. After she checked in, she realized it was a holiday season. So the airport lounge was packed with people. So she had no choice but to share a table with another man. But she wasn't about to let that ruin her mood. So she told herself, it's okay, it's just 1 hour. I'm going to sit down, enjoy my favorite book and my favorite bag of chocolate cookies. So she sat down, went through a couple of pages without looking at the men, and then she reached out for a chocolate chip cookie in front of her. Then immediately at that moment, the man across from her looked up, smiled at her, without saying a word, also helped himself to a chocolate chip cookie. This started to baffle her. How rude. Why are you eating out of my bag of chocolate cookie without even asking? She felt a bit uncomfortable, but then she reminded herself again, wait, I'm going on holidays, don't ruin my good mood, I'm generous enough to share a chocolate chip cookie. Right, so she smiled back forcefully, went back to her book for 2 more pages. Then when she reached out for a second chocolate chip cookie, the man also smiled again and without a word helped himself to a second cookie. So by then, she was no longer able to focus on her book. All she could think about was, why is this man eating out of my favorite chocolate chip cookie bag? So she pretended to be reading and wondered, why she had been so unlucky, to have such terrible bad karma to come across a rude man. But nevertheless, she pretended to be calm and then reached out for a third cookie. So it went on like that. Every time she reached for a cookie, the man also helped himself to a cookie. Until it came the last piece in the bag. So she looked up at the man with a smile, thinking, are you going to be polite to let me have my last cookie in the bag? Then the man again looked up, smiled, reached out for that last piece, broke it in half, and gave her half with a smile. And so she was about to explode. She just couldn't believe her luck. Right? Her mood, her favorite bag of chocolate chip cookie were all ruined because of a rude man. But luckily, call for boarding came, so So she quickly packed up and left. And as soon as she found her seat on the plane, she again told herself, okay, forget about all of it. That's all in the past. I am now on my way to Bali. I'm going to enjoy myself. Forget about all of these bad things. Okay, smile, take a deep breath there. Okay, come back to my book. So she took out her book, and then what she saw was a whole new unopened bag of chocolate chip cookie sitting inside her own bag. All along, she's been eating out of the man's bag, who's very, very generous to share with her, even to the last piece with a smile. But we'll say in this case, there really is no good or bad, is there? Why had the beautiful, juicy taste of the chocolate chunk in the cookies gone away immediately after the first trip? Because all she was thinking about was mine, 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 like the seagulls in Finding Nemo. And so, if there are no such concepts, there's nothing to perceive. That's simply what Avalokiteshvara wants to say. They're not produced, they're not stopped, not defiled, not immaculate, not deficient, not complete. It's all a creation of the mind that we can choose to simply experience and let go. So in that same manner, that's what he means by there's also no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. What you see is not what you see. In your sensoriums, we see that eyes perceive form and color. But why do we put form and color together? When you look at a white cup, you see it's white. But you put form and color together, so now it becomes a cup with a lid. Therefore, if everything is of the same color, then there is no form. That's why you depend on form. And so in that experience, we start to see what we see is merely a projection of our desire. The same goes for our perception of odor, of taste. What we are really tasting is not what we are tasting. That's why some people think durian is absolutely delicious. Right? That's why certain people think durian tastes like gas. But you've never tasted gas. How do you know that durian tastes like gas? You are relying on your sensoriums to create this concept. So if you take a look at this picture, which direction is the train moving? Is it to the right of the screen or to the left of the screen? Can I see a show of hands if you see the train moving to the right of the screen? Okay, quite a few. What about those who see the train moving to the left? Okay, so if those who are seeing a static train, you need to visit the optometrist because it's moving. But the answer is it's moving in both directions. Your eyes will tell you which direction it's moving. This is called the wagon wheel effect. So the motions will trick our eyes into believing that it's moving in a certain direction. So what you do is, now you will either fixate your eye on the right-hand side of the screen, or you fixate your eye on the man on the left-hand side of the screen after you open your eyes. So close your eyes. Okay, now think about which side of the direction of the screen you want to focus your gaze on, then open your eyes again. So if you chose to fix your gaze on the right-hand side of the screen, your train will be moving to the right. Then you close your eyes again and shift your gaze to the man on the left. What do you see now? You see a train moving in any direction you want. But I want to tell you, hold on. There is no train. All along, we are conjuring up this whole concept. And then we allow our emotions and thoughts, right? This whole debate about what is right and wrong to go on based on a picture that is not even real. So a few years ago, I went to Beijing, and our center in Beijing was a rectangular building. And when I arrived in the afternoon to check in, I remember seeing this little girl in skirts running around and screaming. Okay? But I didn't have time to pay much attention to her because I was heading immediately to class. Therefore, I settled down my luggage, I went to class, and by the time I came back, it was about 11 o'clock. All the lights in the corridor had been turned off. So I walked down this long, long corridor with the green egress lights on either end. Right? Pretty spooky, isn't it? Then somehow it started to feel strange because I could feel that there's somebody behind me standing at the other end of the corridor, wearing skirts at the height about 1.1 meter, staring in my direction. So I started to wonder about why would a little girl stand at the end of a corridor at 11 p.m. Right? It was either a little girl or not a little girl. Yeah. If it was a little girl, I was in trouble. I had to help her find her mom. If it wasn't a little girl, I think I had new friends. So the spookiness arose. But immediately I told myself, hey, aren't you a monastic? You're not supposed to be scared, right? Yeah, so I took a deep breath. I went back to my room telling myself that the little girl is not there. But all that night, I couldn't stop thinking and wonder what exactly was that little girl? Why was she standing there in her skirts? I thought about it. I woke up, I thought about it, and then when I finally opened my door to head to my morning class, I looked down the corridor. I broke into laughter. So all along at the end of the corridor, it was just a huge green plant with a big leaf that was swaying in air conditioning. So I had been creating my own image of the girl. I had been creating my own perception of fear. And then it kept me up all night, giving myself endless excuses of why I shouldn't be scared as a monastic. So none of it is there. And so having realized that, then it goes on to what? The continuous lesson from Avalokiteshvara to Sariputra, who says, remember, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, because what you see is not what you see. And there's no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so forth, until we come to no decay and death, and no extinction of decay and death. Again, the concepts that neither arise nor cease. But this concept falls into the reality of birth and death that would continue to travel through the many lifetimes, if you accept the idea of rebirth, that is. And finally, he says there's no suffering, no origination, no stopping, no path. And so on here, we see Avalokiteshvara moves Sariputra's perception onto level 2 of emptiness. That is, everything in this world is in essence empty, which is just the same as the 5 aspects of human experience, which we call Atman. Therefore, Sariputra is taught the reality of practice, to use the sensoriums to tell us that what we are experiencing is not the thing itself. But as we observe the self that is experiencing it, who is looking at whom? Therefore, the chant master will ask you, who is drinking tea now? Is it your sensoriums? Right? This tea is not so good. Right? I love this tea. I'm going to drink 10 more cups. Right? And so on. And therefore, Sariputra at this line is being taught that importance of the prajna paramita, because he's now ready to hop onto the path of a bodhisattva, having realized how to truly perceive the self and reality in terms of the phenomenal world. And so in this case, we see the transformation of human consciousness so that the distinction between the self and other is transcended. And now we begin to experience absolute reality. Therefore, on level 2 shunyata, in plain words, the world you live into is constantly changing and will never stay the same. And what you see is not what you get, especially on your cell phones. You get nothing out of your cell phone, but your whole life is now built upon that cell phone. And what you see needs to be seen with the bodhisattva eye again. So coming this far, yes, we accept that the self is always changing, but we need to live with that self. We accept the fact that the world is changing, but we need to simply be in the moment, not cling on to any of it. But now as we talk about the bodhisattva eye, what do we mean? We begin to feel for what others are feeling under that same circumstance. There was a mom who went home and gave her daughter 2 apples. And the little girl was having so much fun with the 2 apples, and then the mom decided to see if her girl was generous enough. Therefore, she asked her, "Hey, dear, you have 2 apples. Do you want to share?" And immediately upon hearing the word share, the little girl quickly took a bite of each apple. So how would you feel if you were the mom? Would you shake your head in disappointment? Right? Or would you nod your head and say, yes, be greedy, that's how to live life? If you shook your head, what would you do next? What would your reaction be to the little girl who refuses to share? Can I ask a volunteer to see what you would do? What would you do to the little girl? Would you confiscate her apple? Some would, right? What else would you do? Think about it. Any volunteer? What would you do? Okay, you just ruined my party. Yes, indeed. Right? We're hoping that anything you see, give somebody a chance. Before you react, understand first. So this mother decides to ask the little girl, why did you do that when I asked you to share? And this little girl stuck out one of the apples and said, Mom, this one is sweeter, here. Yeah. What was the little girl doing? She wanted to make sure that she gave her mom the better one by tasting it. But as soon as I said she took a quick bite of each apple, you guys were like, oh, greedy little girl, she should be punished. She should never be given an apple again. So ladies and gentlemen, that's okay because that is our perception. We have the concept of generosity being the good thing. So therefore, naturally, you want to share what is right. Okay? But what we see is not what others see. Therefore, in the eyes of a bodhisattva, reality becomes what? The two realities coming together with most appropriate actions and reactions, since we can't get out of it. And so that's why in a bodhisattva's mind, there's no cognition, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Because ultimately, there's no apple, there's no taste, there's no girl, there's no greed, right? There's essentially nothing to be attained. So on level 3 reality, we can say that concepts are merely empty ideas. But these empty ideas are used by bodhisattvas to understand that by means of no concept of self and other, we see everything as a part of us. That becomes the real whole. So when a diver is on the board, right, you might imagine when this Olympic champion goes onto the board and is expected to defend his title. Right? He has no fear about the audience's expectation. Why? Because at that moment, all that crosses his mind is how to do a good dive. There's no I, there is no concept of winning, there's simply just the moment of diving off. Therefore, to that diver, there's no concept of any types of expectations. Only under the circumstance that you are able to enter deep, deep, deep focus on the right thing and the right thoughts. So that is the path of a bodhisattva. So on level 3 shunyata, we would say, yes, concepts are empty too, and the best way to learn now that you have put on your bodhisattva glasses is to first unlearn. Anytime you think somebody is greedy, unlearn. Give them a chance. Right? Anytime you feel an emotion that is negative and overwhelms you, unlearn. So the best way is to empty ourselves. And this, we would say, what do we mean by emptying ourselves? The only way to keep your hands free is to keep them open. Keep your minds open to any type of possibilities. And keep your minds open to any chance or possibility for you to make that encounter wholesome and virtuous. That is the eye of a bodhisattva. And so remember, by saying that, now, there's no you, there's no me, but there is me in you and there's you in me. And I'm very fortunate to be in the presence of this amazing Bodhisattva, who's my teacher, who has continued to teach me that very concept of reconciling the relationship between emptiness and existence, to really harmonize both ends. So as he continues to think about no self, no people, no world, matter, reason, and sentient beings, I totally experienced it right after he recovered from his stroke. At age 90, he suffered this massive stroke that destroyed his language functions, that took away his short-term memory. And the doctor said he may not speak for another year. But miraculously, a month later, Venerable Master Xing Yun began talking. And the first word I heard him said was, "Thank you." He opened his eyes, he saw doctors and nurses, so he said, "Thank you." He remembered there are doctors and nurses, but he didn't remember who he was. And when he returned home, the recovery was a tough one, but we continue to see what really touches our heart. For example, when he was hungry, instead of saying, "I want to eat something," he says, "Can you feed everybody in this room?" And then he would add, "Make sure everybody has enough to eat," before he would eat. And when he was thirsty, he would say, "Give a cup of tea to everybody." So when we heard that, it actually means, "Yes, I'm thirsty." Right? He really structured his language in a very, very interesting way. And we thereby see, yes, your practices, your beliefs will matter in the most crucial moments in your life. Because what you truly believe in will unconsciously display. And this is what he shows, this amazing Bodhisattva heart. And therefore that coincides really well with the very interesting incident in the Vimalakirti Sutra, right? About the celestial goddess who appears in front of Vimalakirti, Manjusri, and Sariputra when they actually visited Vimalakirti, who was sick. But they never realized Vimalakirti was merely manifesting his illness as a way to educate the importance of non-duality. So as they were talking, this fairy goddess started to walk around the room, which annoyed Sariputra. Why? Sariputra began to think, how dare you, a woman, walk in front of us great enlightened men when we're discussing the Dharma? And so immediately, this fairy goddess, who was the manifestation of an enlightened Buddha, turns around and says, "You claim to be a great arhat. Now, I want to ask you a question. How do you let go?" Then she began a rain of flowers. And as soon as the flowers touched the robe of the bodhisattvas who already attained non-attainment, the flowers brushed off immediately. But for Sariputra, the flowers stuck to his robe. No matter how hard he tried to brush off the flower, they just stuck to the robe. And so the fairy goddess says, "You claim to become enlightened, so why are there flowers in your robe?" So immediately Sariputra knew that this fairy goddess was no ordinary fairy goddess. And then the fairy goddess says, "Okay, you're so proud of being a man, now let me turn you into a woman." So she clicked her finger, and then Sariputra turned into a woman in the arhat robe. He panicked. He was just overwhelmed. He didn't know what to do. Right? And so the fairy goddess stood there and said, "Okay, now show me how you turn yourself back into a man." So he says, "I don't know how to." Okay. And the goddess says, "You don't know how to because you are still clinging onto concepts. That's why there's a sense of man and woman." Right? After saying that, she clicks her fingers again. Sariputra is now luckily back into the form of a man. Right? Luckily, quote unquote. And then, having realized this was no ordinary being, the dialogue continued. Right? Sariputra says, "I see you're no ordinary being, so what are you doing in here? How long have you been in here?" The goddess says, "I have been in this room for as long as you have remained unenlightened." "What do you mean? So when will you ever become enlightened?" Then she goes, I will become enlightened on the day you're willing to turn yourself into a woman. Therefore, we see this very interesting dialogue. It's really a lesson for Sariputra to transcend the concepts of you and me, men and women, right or wrong. Right? Only by then will he have the true attainment of non-attainment. And so the bodhisattvas go on. But most importantly, it's not about being a man or a woman, because ultimately the greatest realization for a bodhisattva is to say that, yes, we regard all living beings as our own. So that's why there are bodhisattvas who are willing to delay their own enlightenment until all living beings are liberated. Mind you, that could be extremely hard because we're all still here. And so in that realization, the red is the bodhisattva, and the purple on the right is sentient beings. So a bodhisattva's greatest enlightenment is to realize that when sentient beings are not enlightened, you will never be liberated. Right? And so by saying that your enlightenment is not true enlightenment, it becomes true enlightenment. Sounds confusing, doesn't it? So I would say, when would I ever be happy? I would be happy when all of you are happy. Right? I need to reach that realization. If I do that, I have my enlightenment as a bodhisattva. Right? And then I also realized that if I have attained enlightenment but none of you are happy, I haven't attained true enlightenment. Okay? So that's why X doesn't equal X. But that is the greatest enlightenment of a bodhisattva, to realize that, yes, we are all one. So ultimately, we are all going to attain that liberation together as one, helping each other. So everything you go through will become your tool to help other people. Would you agree? Yeah. You learn how to make tea, but you don't make tea for yourself. Right? You strive to make the best tea in the world only so that your audience will enjoy the best tea, not you. If you only enjoy it yourself, you're going to be so lonely. Okay? And so in San Francisco, there was a man who was known as the young man who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, Kevin Hines. He was about 19 on the day he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge because he was suffering from severe depression for quite a few years. He decided to end his life. Then on the day he walked from his car to the spot where on the bridge where he jumped, he made a pact with himself. He said, if on my way to the spot, should there be as much as one single person who smiles at me, I will give up the idea of jumping. But unfortunately, nobody smiled on that day. I might need to do justice because it's so windy up there. When you go up there, you really can't smile. But that's not excuse. So when he jumped off, he said that in the moment he let go, he regretted it immediately. Within a few milliseconds after he jumped, all he could tell himself was, okay, I need to stay alive, because life is so precious. But to cover those 800 meters at free fall, the speed of free fall, it only took him less than 4 seconds to hit the surface of the water. So at the speed of pretty much 60 kilometers per hour, when his 60-kilogram body hits the surface of the water, the impact is 10 times as much as you having jumped off a 10-story building onto concrete. So all he could think about was to keep his limbs together so that he would enter the water in a streamline. But even when he did it, it was winter day. It was a -2-degree day. So when the icy water entered his organs, he said it was like a million needles piercing through his organs. It was excruciating pain. And almost every bone in his spine broke, but he survived. He survived, and then after 2 years of rehabilitation, he told himself, I am now going to do my best to make sure whoever goes through the same experience gets help. So he begins to write his biography. He traveled North America to give talks. He established a foundation to help young people suffering from depression. to recover. And when he managed to do that, he went back to the spot where he jumped off and took a picture with a big smile. And we would say this is a bodhisattva who did not reject the experiences of life, but found the courage and the strength to turn that painful experience into a wonderful tool to help more people. So that was his enlightenment. Right? My pain can now become a way to lessen somebody's pain. Therefore, in the eyes of a bodhisattva, when you say we are all one, there are so many things that you can do to show your kindness. And that's why in certain countries in the world, we have suspended coffee. The idea is that you can walk into a cafe, you can pay for 10 cups of coffee without drinking a single drop, and say, anyone who walks through and needs a cup of coffee and doesn't have money can have this as my treat. And so that helped a lot of homeless men survive winter. And in Taiwan, we have suspended noodles for financially challenged families to really get a warm meal. You don't have to know somebody to be kind to them. You just need to want to be kind. And then you can do so much. You can do so much once you realize that you are one with all living beings. And therefore, I see the same in my teacher. Even in his illness, all he could think about is what will happen to the 100 financially challenged children that I'm sponsoring. And so although he could no longer see, he continues to write all this calligraphy that you see outside, all for one reason. So it goes to all the Xingyun foundations around the world, so that people who want to study at our universities, people who want to go to school, will have a scholarship. So the scholarship has gone to our MTI, 19 Institute. It has gone to Wagon University. It has gone to Pullman University for children who cannot afford to go to school. And it has gone to Philippines, to a group of Catholic children who come from the remote islands where there is no even flushing toilet or clean water. But when he founded the Guangming College in Philippines, all he wanted to do was to give these children hope. And so when these children first arrived in Manila, our temple, to study at Guangming Temple, they received full scholarship, free boarding, and they were even given chances to come to Taiwan should they do well in their studies. So in their third year, when they finally met Venerable Master Xingyun at a youth seminar, this 16-year-old girl got up and asked him a question. We've never met you. You don't know who we are. Why did you help us? And in reply, Venerable Master Xingyun said, because we are one. We are all family. I don't need to know who you are. I just need to know that I can help you. So the little girl was so touched. On the next year, when she came back, as she was about to graduate, she made a promise to Venerable Master. This is what she said. She said, thank you, Venerable Master, for giving us a chance at education. So I won't be herding cows. I won't be sent to a brothel. I now have a chance at life to pursue my dreams. But I thank you. So as a way to thank you, I promise you that in 10 years' time, all graduates from Guangming in college will help spread the messages of Buddhism. That all graduates of Guangming College will use what they have learned in university to contribute to world peace. When she said that, Venerable Master Xingyun was 90 years old, and she said in 10 years. So as I was translating for Venerable Master, I wondered, right, if she needed to make him wait that long. And I also wondered if Venerable Master would reply with a very casual thank you. But instead, having lost 99% of his vision, he turned in the direction of the little girl and said, thank you so much. If I don't live to see that day, I promise to come back to see you in my next life. So we say, no, there's no self, there's no you, there's no time, there's no space. Any moment you make this great emotional and spiritual connection, you are connected forever. And so I truly believe that when this 16-year-old little girl makes a pact with a 90-year-old Buddhist monk, yes, in their next lifetime, they will come together again, right, to spread the messages of good. This, I'm sure, being the witness. And so that is the Bodhisattva heart we see. And so finally, it says, since Bodhisattvas have no attainments, they rely on perfection of wisdom and abiding it. Having no obscuration in their minds, they have no fear, and by going utterly beyond error, they will reach the end of nirvana. And so after the third level of shunyata, we see that the Heart Sutra is progressive. Taught from the basic level, we understand that the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body are empty. But now, we are taught about the prajnaparamita. That takes us to a higher level, for us to understand what it means to have no obstruction. For Venerable Master Xing Yun, he has no fear in life and death. He only has fear in lesser opportunity to do more. That's his fear. And in the diver's mind, he has no obstruction because he has no fear. He has no topsy-turvy thoughts. He has no distorted thoughts about anything else other than to do a good dive. That's all he thought about. And so for that, we see true enlightenment, where enlightenment comes alongside the whole idea of nirvana, where we see that, yes, we can all attain nirvana, but for us, when we still have cognitive functions, we can only attain nirvana with remainders. And that remainder means we attain a moment of peace with an aspect of human experience, that is skandha. And for a true bodhisattva who can attain nirvana with remainder, it means they are now beyond all human experiences. But Avalokiteshvara says there's nothing better than enlightenment taken under human experience, because it's the only way you will ever feel. So therefore, we close the Heart Sutra with Gate, Gate, Paragate. Parasamgate Bodhisvaha. Gone, gone, gone beyond. Gone entirely beyond enlightenment hell. After all, what you have read isn't a sutra. What you have seen and heard is nothing but the mantra. It's a mantra of praise and recognition of enlightenment. But it's not the mantra that removes suffering. It is the enlightening experience that leads us to the perfection of wisdom. So this word, Gate, Gate, right? It would lead to us to that true enlightenment. And closing by what? Bodhiswaha. Right? Swaha is actually feminine. So we close by hailing the mother of all wisdom, which is the Prajnaparamita. So in closing, the Heart Sutra in plain words will tell us, yes, after all of this, if you understand the Heart Sutra well, the only way to practice it well is, first of all, embrace this ever-changing imperfect self, because you have to live with it. You can never get away from it. And secondly, embrace this imperfect and ever-changing world, because you can never get away from it either. So we may as well make peace. But amidst all of this chaos, remember we are all each fighting our own battles. We're all trying to make life better. So by Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, it means feel for others, for their sake. That's exactly how we remove dukkha. So level 1, level 2, level 3. Wherever you are, I hope you're at peace. And thank you very much for listening. I've been asked to leave 10 minutes aside for any questions and answers. I hope you don't ask any difficult questions. But again, there are no difficult questions.
So
ask the staff member to bring the microphone around to our friend in the back.
Could you expound on the feel for others? Is it something that you share the suffering, or even if they don't suffer, you take away the suffering, or what is it, feeling for others?
It's hard to feel for others, isn't it? Because we don't know what others are feeling, since there are no feelings. But from what my teacher has taught me, one way to feel for others is at least to remember that whatever pain or dukkha you have experienced does not repeat on others. So for my teacher, when he grew up in a very chaotic era, very often there was no food on his table. Even after he arrived in Taiwan, he was actually regarded as a spy from the Communist Party, so none of the temples in Taiwan were willing to take him in. So his very first night in Taiwan was spent under the eave of a temple on a rainy day. And then when he continued to try to find a place to live, there were moments or days when he would go without food for almost 2 to 3 days. And if we were him, what would we think? Right? If I ever have food, I will make sure that I enjoy them to the utmost. Or in Gone with the Wind, I promise I shall never go hungry again, but you will. But for Venerable Master, when he experienced extreme poverty and hunger, he says, this extreme moment of hunger will remind me that in the future, should I ever have the ability to feed people, I promise that anybody who enters my door will walk away well-fed without having to pay $1. That's how he feels for others. And when he grew up never having the opportunity to receive education, he makes this grand vow to found a university so that he would offer full scholarship to any student who wanted to learn. But he went too far. He ended up establishing 5 universities around the world. His vow was that grand. Even up to now, he's thinking, what else can I do for these people, for these students? And so his vow, which resulted from those moments of poverty and hunger, is now the Nantian Institute we see. It is now the colleges. It is now the amazing temples who keep outdoors open and welcomes anybody who seeks a nice, warm, vegetarian meal. Sorry, we only serve vegetarian. And so to feel for others, yes, we can't imagine others' pain, but remember our own pain. Not to reciprocate, not to take the revenge, but we remember what we go through so that we help others go through it better. I would say that's how my teacher has taught me to feel for others, for their sake. Not for my own self-fulfillment, not for anything else, but just for them.
My question is in relation to yesterday. Everyone knows there's global warming protest in Australia. So we understand we need to embrace the imperfect world. We understand we need to do something to protect our environment. However, it is still my concern as a Buddhist. How do we do to face this future problem as a world? How do we? I know we can't get rid of it, but how can we survive? Thank you.
Big question. Okay? Big question with a very small answer. I pondered over this too, right? When Gretchen Henderson, what's her name? The Swedish primary school girl called upon all primary school students to go on a strike in order to awaken the adults' attention to dealing with these climate issues, right? People are asking, why don't you Buddhists also do the same? And I would say, my master has taught me that Buddhists never go on a strike. That's the first thing. But secondly, as we've talked about this immense need to change the external world, Right? The only way to change that external world is to first begin with our external world. And that's why you would see the concept of a simple life presented through the practice of Chan. Right? A simple cup of tea, a very simple life. Okay? We monastics own 2.5 kilos of luggage. Right? I've been wearing this robe for 20 years. Sometimes I wonder why it hasn't fallen apart, so I won't get a new one. Yeah. But I'm very grateful that it hasn't fallen apart, so I continue to see life in this robe. So there are certain things that we can't do. And when we are not sure, you begin with what you can do. So I really enjoyed this afternoon's session on the forum as to what we can do to reduce plastic waste. But I think most importantly, when we reduce the needs of our heart, we can already start to make a change. But most importantly, how do we make our voice heard so that others can also follow? So this is I don't have an answer for you, but every day I think about it, I remind myself not to use any plastic products. I remind myself to bring my cup with me, to bring my bowl with me, and to bring my own cutlery. But my fork and knife got confiscated at the airport. So we are a long way from realizing, minimal cost, minimal waste, minimal product. But somehow we're going to get there if you hang around the people who share that same value. Yeah, so thank you for mentioning that. I hope we really do something, starting from ourselves. Well, no more glad wrap today after the beeswax wrap, right? I hope so. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? In the front here.
Hi there, thank you very much for your talk. Although I'm not Buddhist, I feel very drawn to many of the Buddhist ideas, and I really thank you for your talk. One of the things I struggle with my spiritual practice is when I consider the nature of the world, emptiness, and the world being a dream and stuff like that, I find the kind, compassionate, caring nature that I have seems to be very much gone almost, and so then I try to go back to just focusing on practices of being kind and compassionate, and then I feel back to my normal self again. And so although I want to ponder those concepts, and I do on a daily basis, I try to balance that with kindness and compassion, and how what are your suggestions for finding that balance?
How do we sustain our peace and kindness? How do we find that sustained compassion? This reminds me of my meeting with Thomas Freeman, the Pulitzer Prize winner, right? The journalist who began his work in the Middle East in his early 20s. So on that day, I really asked him the same question. I asked him, you've worked in the Middle East, you witnessed all forms of war. You see the Iraqi young men who were raised to use machine guns, who were taught the message of hate against those who violated against them. Every day, they will be fighting. Every day, they will be running. There's not a day they were able to ever think about the chance of holding a girl's hands, or to kiss a girl, or to really enjoy the happiness of a romantic relationship. So what do you say to these people who no longer believe that peace could be a reality? So he told me that on his first day at work, when he arrived in his office, he heard this loud explosion in an embassy around his office. So he quickly ran out, and he saw that one of these embassies were blown up. So it was like a cake that was cut in half. He could see bodies hanging off the separation, the part where the building separated. Right? He just felt desperate. And immediately upon that moment, he thought about, what about this man, young men who may never smile again, who may never feel happy again? And then his answer was only one. In moments when you are in despair, in the moments when you feel like you have no more kindness or compassion, find somebody who has that kindness and compassion. To be in their presence, to be in their energy, because no man is an island. We can never rely on ourselves to attain enlightenment, right? So we can never be happy alone, we can never be sad alone, we can never be anything alone. And so that's why we appreciate the presence of what we call virtuous companies who has greater positive energies than us. So as a monastic, sometimes I feel lost. So I turn to my seniors, and I turn to my peers and juniors who tend to have this greater sense of energy that's just so positive that just to be in her presence, you're able to be inspired in that way. So Venerable Jue Wei at Nantian Temple, they call her the infectious venerable. Right? She infects people with her smile. Just seeing her smile, you want to smile. Yeah, so it's okay. It's okay when you're not happy. It's okay to not want to have kindness. But the most important thing is we have awareness of that. We need to realize this is where I am right now. And then find somebody who can help us change. So we have many opportunities. So thank you for being here tonight. And I hope your affinity with the people in this room has begun tonight. And you may continue to find that source of kindness and compassion in the future. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you, Reverend, for your talk tonight. It is really inspiring, and I think what has inspired me the most is when we look at the girl with the 2 apples, like what you say. To me, automatically, I might say, oh, that's really greedy, and what I would do is make the child eat both the apples, and next time won't be greedy anymore. So therefore, what you perceive, like what you say, is really, really relevant in today's society. And for me, particularly, I want to be able to learn what, Reverend, you have been saying in terms of what you see is not what others may see, and the best way to learn is to unlearn and to empty yourself. Could I then ask Reverend to sort of give us some guidance in terms of what's the best way we can use to unlearn ourselves?
How much time do I have? Well, if I only have 10 seconds, I'll ask you to pay your attention to the courses offered at Nantian Institute. I'm serious. I'm not going to get an apple from Venerable Manka for saying this to me this evening. But I'm serious because your answer is, your question is something that we want to provide answers to. And it's not a small question. So at Nantian, we now begin these graduate certificates to really think about how do we instill the values of humanistic Buddhism into everything that we do, so that we find a source of strength and power to enhance our existing profession, so that we become a better counselor, we become a better lawyer, we become a better teacher, a better doctor. And so I would say I can't answer your question in one line, except for all the things I have said. But in the future, if you really have the chance to tap into these graduate courses about mindfulness, right? About the application of compassion, right? How do we gauge the level of our compassion and kindness, right? These methods taught to us will be so valuable at Nantian Institute. Yeah, so definitely give it a try. Thank you very much for your response.
好，那我们再次用最热烈的掌声，感谢妙光法师今天为我们精辟的讲解精进的理论以及实践。那希望大家回家以后呢，可以用1、2点今天妙光法师分享的，在家里、在生活、在工作中实践。那我们再次热烈掌声，感谢妙光法师。
Please put your hands together. Thank Venerable Miao Guang for a deep and wise talk this evening.
好，那现在 在场的大众呢，我们的茶禅使者将有第3杯的茶禅，那欢迎大家可以坐下来。那如果我们现在可以看到还有一些空位，如果后面的观众也想要参加现在这个水洗茶禅，那可以来坐在这些现有的空位，可以欢迎大家到空位上坐下。
So please, we now have another tea ceremony session. So please feel free to come forward and fill up the seats. There are so many seats up here in the front. We have another session of the tea ceremony, and we hope you guys have had an amazing evening here with us. And tomorrow we have another activity. This is a 2-day program here for the environmental and spiritual preservation workshops. We have another day full of activities tomorrow here at the Concourse. We have the calligraphy exhibition will begin at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we have the One Heart for Many Hearts, an introduction to Venerable Master Xingyun's one-stroke calligraphy, which will be happening Dharma talk here from 10:30 to 12 tomorrow, right here in the Auditorium Hall. And that is also another talk here once again by Venerable Miao Guang, who I'm sure after listening to this evening's talk has a wide experience and knowledge they can share for all aspects of Buddhism. So tomorrow, another talk by Venerable Miao Guang, One Heart for Many Hearts, an introduction to Venerable Master Xingyun's one-stroke calligraphy.
What time?
The Dharma talk tomorrow will be right here from 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. And the one-stroke calligraphy exhibition the doors will open to the general public at 10 o'clock in the morning. And then after the Dharma talk tomorrow, once again by Venerable Miao Guang from 10:30 to 12, we have a Tai Chi talk in the afternoon from 2 to 3:30. Right here in the auditorium hall.
那明天呢，我们将继续星云大师一笔字书法展，以及早上呢将有10点半将有妙光法师的新的祝福法的体悟，谈星云大师一笔字的中文讲座。那欢迎大家明天还可以继续的回来这边 Chatswood 的 Concourse 来参加我们一系列的活动。那明天下午呢，我们还有在2点到3点半有太极养生与养心的讲座，欢迎大家都可以在明天继续回到 Chatswood Concourse 和我们一起来继续这个心灵讲座以及书法展的这个展览。谢谢大家，那希望大家继续的享受最后的一场水洗茶禅。
We hope you continue to enjoy the tea ceremony that's happening for you now, and we do encourage that everyone at the tables to hold a conversation and to introduce yourself to each other and reflect upon this evening's talk by Venerable Miao Guang for the Heart Sutra Theory and Practice talk that she just held with us. So as you're enjoying the tea ceremony, just a heads up to let everybody know that in the back corner here where I'm pointing is a pledge for using less plastic in your life. And if you make a pledge, then you guys can receive a free bag as well. That's in the back corner there. And the tea ceremony here and everything this evening's will conclude at 8:50, which is about 10 minutes from now. So if you've got a moment before you head out today, make sure you stop by the back corner there to make a pledge to use less plastic and receive a free gift bag.
好，那各位来宾，在您走之前，还温馨的提醒大家，您可以到我们左手边的角落去收集一些如何让自己的生活能够更加环保的资料，还有 Willoughby Council 提供的一些 workshops。那如果您可以去那个地方，也可以上网去 make a pledge。那如果你上网去承诺你将要做一位素食者，你可以1个礼拜1次，或者是1个月1次都没有关系。